All right, Travis Wingoodsell. During this coronavirus, we've been witnessing a lot of science denier scientists, not just citizens who are denying their education in the fields of science. That's somewhat understandable, as the grade school education in science is just a general concept. It doesn't get into specifics as to how to develop theories and run tests on those theories, unless you do a science fair project on battery life or Barbie doll fashion response to animal reaction, or whatever it is you come up with. Volcanoes exploding. That's what I wanted to do, and then was inspired by a MacGyver episode to do musical composition of birds on telephone wires. But nonetheless, on academia.edu I was attacked somewhat recently, within the last week or so, by a guy presenting himself as a retired geologist. And so that's a hard science, geology. And for some reason he chose to attack me. I don't know if he's attacking others in like manner, going around finding any and all people who do anything that talks about religious scriptural science, because that was my field of study, was biblical studies as a science-based research. And so it wasn't a Mormon centered research. It was not from Rick's. It was a top 5 in the world university at the time, University of Lethbridge. And so I learned about the documentary hypothesis, and then also took philosophy of science to understand that the documentary hypothesis is a failed hypothesis and therefore must be discarded, as we must look for another one. But that's the weird thing I found, is that even though once a theory or a hypothesis is exposed as incorrect, soundly argued against, that it must therefore be dismissed. And unfortunately, they keep presenting the same old theories that have been debunked. But the education I received presented multiple theories along with their debunked arguments, and so it left me wondering, then none of that is true, then what is the truth? And that's just it. Nobody knows. That's the actual answer coming out of my education, is that nobody knows the origin of the Bible, as to whether it's historical or what happened, because nobody can find King David in Jerusalem. As much as people claim to find a certain little amulet or little clay piece that has House of David or David or whatever on it, it's not evidence that King David had his capital at Jerusalem, at the Jerusalem Temple, at the Jerusalem Palace. And And so people just make that assumptive leap and deny science in that pursuit. Another example is this guy who's attacking me is using psychology to attack me with ad hominem on top of it. And so I'm pointing out, quoting from him, his ad hominem use of psychological attacks of unsound argument, and then he comes back and replies that psychology is a hard science. Oh dear God, I cannot have a conversation with somebody who is a science denier scientist, because they aren't living in reality. Psychology is not a hard science. Case in point, you go to the doctor, you say, I don't feel well. And the medical doctor does a whole bunch of tests, takes blood samples, does x-rays, whatever hard science measurements to check out if there's anything causally wrong with your physical body. And the way he knows if something is wrong is that he already knows what the human body should normally behave and act like. So that he does all these standard measurements to identify a causal malady, something that's out of place. One of these things is not like the other, one of these things just isn't the same, if you remember that from Sesame Street. And so that's what he's checking for, is for abnormalities in the body. Coronavirus, we know it exists because the doctors have identified it. They've shown us the picture of it. We now know. It is not normal to have that in our bodies, and they've called it coronavirus. So, if you were to go to a psychologist, therapist, counselor, whatever in that field, and you go to them and you say, I don't feel well, what do? They sit you on a couch and they talk with you. They have you share your feelings. They talk about your past, your childhood. They talk about whether you feel guilty about masturbating. Literally. It's like, what? And at the end, they say, oh, well, it's a mental illness you have. Here's some drugs. Go to the pharmacy and pay the money to get them. Hopefully you have insurance that you're paying them on a regular monthly basis so that the payment for the drugs is lessened. and you go your way and you do what they order. Well, that's like a placebo effect, which has negative consequences because the drugs that psychiatrists prescribe are psychotropic, which cause side effects. You hear all about them on your TV commercials for whatever new name they're calling the same old product that they've tricked the FDA into, again, presenting to the public. And then getting psychiatrists who don't take the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm to get kickbacks for using human patients as experimental lab rats for the newest drug. And so there is no hard science for any field in psychology. That's why they're a pseudoscience. They're fake. They don't use standard measurements because there's nothing to look for in regards to a malady. All it is a person's behavior, their speech. And from that, they make a determination to prescribe psychotropic drugs for behavioral control. You are never cured in psychology. You have the mental illness for the rest of your life. Now, people are rising up saying, "Oh, no, my kid has autism. He was tested." Okay, but notice there are spectrums of autism. And they're not supposed to be cured, remember? Yet I have a nephew who is cured. My sister had 5 or a billion baby boys, all testing for autism. Way to go, Longazo. Because that's the only different factor in the equation. Tiffany's kids, no autism. My kids, no autism. Todd, he'll never get married. Tabitha, no autism. So, Tara Lynn, what's the unique feature of her? Well, her husband. It's not a difficult thing to do. That's what you do in science. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just isn't the same. And I don't know if they're actually doing that, if they're going to the husband and saying, "Okay, we're noticing a pattern in your children. We need to test the person with the difference," and that would be the husband in this case. And so they should be testing the husband to find out, is there something in your DNA that is causing this particular problem in the children? But I would hope that they're doing MRIs or other medical tests to verify that what is outwardly apparent with the children is what is supposed to be what they're calling autism, and that they're not just seeing a behavioral problem in the kids and concluding that conclusion. And that's the difference between real hard science and pseudoscience, is that if all these people who have mental illness, like Parkinson's, it's a real mental condition, but it's identified by a medical doctor, not a psychologist. And so as a result, you have a medical doctor that would treat a person with Parkinson's. Alzheimer's, also identified by medical doctors, not by psychologists. And so there's a huge difference. And yet, in our society, psychologists are given the exact equal treatment as a hard science medical doctor. And that's a naughty no-no. They've deceived people into making people believe that they're legitimate. They're not. They're frauds. And the same goes with religion. In religion, people tend to think that all of the material world is irrelevant. It's the spirit, the spiritual world, the spiritual life that is important. And as a result, many in religion who may have hard science career fields, when it comes to religious matters, all of a sudden abandon everything that they've been taught about the scientific processes and procedures, as they allow their pastor or religious leader, bishop, stake president, prophet, to deceive them and lead them down the wrong path, which can cause harm in such cases as a coronavirus, where Nelson came out with his video saying, "Oh yeah, I really appreciate all the hard work by all the doctors and nurses and researchers for the coronavirus, but I'm a man of faith. He's a medical doctor. And as a result, he put religion over his medical training during a medical crisis. And as a result, Mormons are dying. Mormons are getting infected. His coronavirus fasts, in the plural, he had 2 of them, both of them failed, and now this Friday he's going to be making a big announcement how Jesus cures. As they're advertising, he's done it all, he's healed, he's cured, he's healed hearts, literal and figuratively. No, he hasn't. Literally, yes, but figuratively, hell no. Again, that's psychology interfering with science, with the front of religion. And so it's going to be pathetic what he thinks he's going to be coming up with on Friday, if it hasn't already been done and they're just doing the post-production stuff to premiere it on Friday. You know, I don't know if it's live or if it's a pre-recorded thing. But I mean, it's just, I already know if he's going to promote faith in Jesus to cure coronavirus, to cure hunger, to cure the economy that has collapsed, he needs to be banned from all social media platforms for spreading fake news that can cause harm. But nobody's doing it. Why? Because they're multi-trillionaires who invest in these social media platforms, specifically so that they can spread their falsehood and lead people to their deaths, causing harm. In Mormonism, true Mormonism, if I were to do a True Mormonism 101 video, the Spirit is truth. Therefore, as truth, it is science-based. And so the physical is the results of the Spirit, which is science-based. So you get an idea in your head, you call it revelation from the Spirit. You don't just go around telling everybody, hey, the Spirit told me this is true. You don't have any evidence. All you know is that something in your head told you something to believe in. And you may have had warm, fuzzy feelings and it may have made you cry. That's not proof. That's hearsay. Just like psychologists, when they say, well, tell me about it. Share with me your feelings. That's hearsay. You don't cure with hearsay. And so the physical is necessary to be joined with the spiritual. The two must be together. If you're corrupt spiritually, it will eventually be made manifest physically. That's what it's happening with the church, is that they've talked the talk for so many decades that now under Nelson, when it matters most during a pandemic that has destroyed the economy, that has destroyed people's lives, people are suffering. And Nelson now wants to say, oh, just believe in Jesus and everything will be fine. Yeah, well, that's the manifestation. That's the fruits of the Spirit of Nelson. By their fruits ye shall know a false prophet. Matthew 7. The comparable verse in the Book of Mormon. This is what they're trying to warn us about. These frauds who are science deniers. They are using the hard science field of agriculture. By their fruits ye shall know them. Well, that's agriculture. People know agriculture in that day because they were pretty much all farmers. They knew and understood the concept of farming. Today, we go to a grocery store. It's magically appearing on our shelves. And we're shocked and horrified when coronavirus takes it away. We don't understand. What happened? I had faith that I could go to my grocery store and food would magically appear that I could buy. You don't understand the concept of seed needing to be turned into a fruit. Seed alone is worthless. Just like spirit alone is worthless. Just like faith alone is worthless. You have to have the manifestation in the physical reality. Without it, you have to ignore and dismiss the spiritual. If it can't be proven in the flesh, you must deny it. And yet people are denying the physical realm for the spiritual. This is what it means to be a science denier scientist. Is that people that live their lives in the physical reality, who know the physical reality, and yet say, nope, not true, fake news, hoax, I'm going to ingest disinfectants because the Spirit told me so. I'm going to have faith in Jesus and do nothing in the physical reality. This is why Nelson coming out Friday with his video is going to be so dangerous. It is a threat. It is a terrorist attack. And all of social media will not ban him. And so, yeah, with the guy from academia.edu, when he told me that psychology is a hard science, yeah, I didn't even bother to read the rest of his rant. I looked for a way to ban him, and the best I can come up with was spamming him. They don't have a thing for banning harassers. So I hope that does it. But dear God, I mean, he's wasted his whole life. If he's a geologist retired, what the hell was he doing? What damage needed to be repaired after his retirement? Likewise with Nelson. You know, we all know he came up with the new heart technology and did the surgery on Spencer W. Kimball. That's why he was made an apostle. But to have him just say during this medical crisis, to just, oh, yep, believe in Jesus. Yeah, we're multi-trillionaires, but we're not giving it any to you. We're only going to give what people donate, of which we don't invest for ourselves, and it's a minimal amount in comparison percentage-wise to the multi-trillions they have. They could easily solve the world's problems. Physically solve, because they're that rich. because they're that organized. And they're refusing. They're letting people suffer. They're letting people get infected. They're not caring for the poor and the needy, the sick and the afflicted. They're letting us die. That's the terrorist threat. And all of social media is in on it because they're paid by them.